Hello, Space Watchers. Welcome to the second series of our special collaboration with the Prague Security Studies Institute, PSSI. 2 years ago, at the 6th Prague Space Security Conference, we launched a joint project with them to create a special podcast mini-series focused on allied preparedness to face the rapidly evolving space security landscape. It's an absolute pleasure for us to partner with PSSI, a non-profit, non-governmental public policy organization founded in early 2002 and based in Prague. The Institute, among its activities, seeks to illuminate unconventional threats emanating from authoritarian governments that challenge the transatlantic alliance and other partners globally, especially in the economic and financial and space domains. All the interviews in this space security mini-series were conducted during the 7th Prague Space Security Conference, held from the 16th to the 18th of June 2024. The traditionally biannual event will now be held every year. It has become a well-known and established high-level conference series with senior officials from Europe, the US, and Japan. And for the first time, there were also representatives from South Korea and Taiwan, as well as select experts from industry and academia. This series, launched in 2011, is designed to advance allied policy decision-making on critical space security issues. This unclassified gathering brings together the highest levels of military allies, national security experts, and senior industry representatives. Enjoy your listening. Hello, Space Watchers, and welcome back to a new episode of Space Cafe. We have the pleasure and honor to be here with Kari Bingen, the Director of Aerospace Security Projects Center for Strategic and International Studies. Hello, Kari. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing great, Emma. It's wonderful to be here.
Thank you very much. So let's dig into this concept that is particularly important for the space sector, the blurry line, the important collaboration between intelligence and defense and the commercial sector. In what ways you think that intelligence and defense strategies can incorporate a commercial dimension?
It's a great question, and it is such an exciting time to be in the space sector today, particularly with the different trends happening in the commercial space sector. I think the real benefit that these commercial space capabilities bring, whether they be remote sensing, space situational awareness capabilities, space communications, is there is now a greater accessibility, shareability, and transparency that comes with commercial, non-classified capabilities and data collection. We've seen it in Ukraine, where commercial imagery systems were highlighting malign activity of Russian forces being built up across the border and then invading Ukraine. For the military, commercial remote sensing can provide indicators of change, and it can also support a broader range of applications outside of the traditional military and intelligence sphere. Maritime domain awareness, encountering illegal fishing, trafficking, understanding the changing climate. These have not traditionally been priorities for government, for intelligence and defense satellite systems, but with these commercial capabilities, those applications are being opened up.
The doors are open, is it? And just wondered, you mentioned very interesting applications. How substantial is the market actually at the moment?
So there are varying estimates out there. One estimate I've seen in terms of the global space economy, it is estimated to be roughly $569 billion. And I've seen estimates where that is growing to anywhere from $1 to $3 trillion, and that's the space economy. But if you think about everything that space enables, GPS, Galileo in our phones, our navigation systems in our cars, global communications connectivity, the market there is even more, I'll say, trillions of dollars beyond just space itself. The other thing I just want to mention as well that's changed throughout the last several years that I've been in this area is just the speed and agility and innovation happening in space. When I first started in this sector as a young aerospace engineer, you could spend half your career working on one satellite program, 5-10 years designing, building, and then eventually seeing your satellite launch. Nowadays, you go to some of these startup companies, you go to SpaceX, you'll see one satellite produced every few months, or with Starlink, 6 satellites produced a day. And so these young folks coming into our ecosystem, rather than work on one satellite every 10 years, they're getting to touch hardware and solve problems every couple of days, every couple of months. And so there's just this amazing innovation happening in our sector, not just on the satellite side, but also on the analytics side, what we're doing with all this data we're collecting, how advanced computing is helping us, how we're applying artificial intelligence to really make sense of what we're seeing on the ground, what we're seeing in space, and to do it at machine speeds. Our policymakers, users, analysts, they want those insights much faster.
Yeah, the problem then is that the government cannot catch up, because definitely humans cannot go as fast as machines and technologies.
It's a great point. I think what you're seeing in this technology sector right now is they are fast outpacing the government, and really the government policy and regulations.
Yeah, because as you mentioned, machine learning and AI, obviously they're speeding up the data processing. Something that took 6 months before now takes 6 hours. So the
amazing.
Technology is going faster and faster, but we humans cannot go faster and faster. And bureaucracy at its very slow geological pace in a sort of way. But so you spoke about the dimension of the possibilities. I would like to discuss with you now a bit the challenges and the limitations. So on the opposite side of the spectrum, what do you think are the main limitations and challenges in integrating the commercial aspect into intelligence and defense strategies?
So interestingly, I think it's less technology barriers. There is an incredible innovation ecosystem out there, both in the United States, in Europe, and with other allies and partners across the globe, and frankly, with others that would do more malign things with those technologies. I think for us, it very much is the challenge of policy, process, culture. So we tend to be adverse to risk-taking. And I think now when you were building a multi-billion-dollar satellite every 10 years, it had to work. You really had no margin for error. Now when you're launching satellites every few months, you're building multiple satellites a day off a production line, you can afford to take a little risk. You can build good enough, and then you can quickly introduce new or evolved capabilities. So we need to shift how we've done business in the past and our culture there to adopting these different approaches. I do think for the government in particular, they do need to have confidence that these commercial providers, the data is of a quality, it's not corrupted. Connectivity, they want to make sure that the connectivity is secure. So there are steps that I think the commercial sector will have to take to build that confidence with the government. Funding will continue to be a challenge. And lastly, integration is, we have so many sources of data from different satellite systems, from ground and air sensors, from allied and partner countries. We want to be able to bring that all together and maximize the insights that we get from that. But I would tell you, organizations tend not to fund integration as much. It's not as sexy as building a new satellite. So sometimes that can be tough as well. But integration, networks that provide connectivity, those are crucial going forward if we're going to leverage all of the capability that is out there for us.
It's a very interesting point about integration, not as sexy as building a new rocket. So certain applications, unfortunately, somehow they are in the background, but they still need to be put together to make everything, whatever looks sexy, like a launching of a new mission, making work. And that's a very interesting point.
You think about how you want to be the architect of a community or you want to be a builder of a house. We also need plumbers and electricians that can work through the wiring, everything that's critical to making that house livable.
Very good point. Absolutely. So there has been a recently published document. It's called the U.S. Space Force Commercial Space Policy. What do you think which impact do you think this document is going to have on the commercial space market?
So I commend Space Force and the U.S. Department of Defense as well. They put out a commercial space integration strategy. I think both of these were strong documents. I very much liked the emphasis on integration, back to our earlier discussion here. I think it sends a positive signal to the market, to our industrial base. But the challenge ahead is going to be implementation. Will we see it implemented? Will we see greater resources put towards leveraging and integrating these commercial capabilities?
So how do you think that the government can maintain control over large commercial entities given its dependence on these services? Because what you mentioned before, the problem of how the commercial sector needs to be proved that it's safe and worth it to the government. Data quality, connectivity issues, all those things that the commercial sector has to prove that it's able to provide them at the right standard to the government. But then the government somehow becomes dependent on the service but wants to maintain control. How does this work? It's a complex relationship somehow.
And I want to be careful because I actually don't want the government to control these commercial entities. Now, I do want to see policy and regulatory frameworks that provide some right and left limits for operating these capabilities, but I don't want to see government control. I think that's going to be the quickest thing to killing the viability of this sector going forward. However, if the government is worried that these commercial services, these commercial capabilities won't be there when needed. For example, there were reports in the media that Starlink turned off its service to certain parts of Ukraine. I would challenge that, but I think the importance there is get those companies on contract. When you are on contract, when a company is on contract, it has to fulfill the terms and conditions of that contract. So that's how the government is able to ensure that the capabilities that it wants and needs are delivered. I also think on both sides, both the government and the private sector, the government, we need to build confidence in the private sector capabilities. The government needs to understand both the capabilities that can be offered as well as the limitations of those capabilities. I would not want to sit here and say commercial can do everything because it will have its limitations as well.
It's a risky thing also to go down the road over-promising.
Exactly. Set the bar low. But you want to understand the capabilities, the limitations. But then on the private sector side, they need to have a better understanding of the missions, what users need, the problems that their technological solutions are meant to address. Technology in search of a solution, I've generally found not to be a successful formula. So the importance of our governments conducting and funding exercises, pilots, MVP, so minimum viable products. Don't wait 10 years to get the 100% perfect solution. Spend 6 months, spend 12 months getting a good enough solution fielded and let your users kick the tires on it, figure out how to leverage it, and then provide feedback back to those developers on how to improve it. Demand signal. The government can send a clear demand signal to the private sector. Architectural roadmaps with an understanding of what the commercial role should be. They can provide programs, funding, structure contracts. The unique thing now is you have this private capital that up until the last, say, 10 or so years, space was it was done by governments, it was funded by governments. We now have this very vibrant private capital sector that wants to invest in national and international security. We need to take advantage of that. But that private sector, those private capital investors also need to see some return on investment. But maybe the last thing I'd offer here too is I think that the government, rather than maintain control, they can buy these commercial capabilities and services on timelines relevant to the speed of business, the speed at which companies are moving, the speed at which investors are investing, as opposed to these very drawn out traditional government processes where it takes you 18 to 24 months to build a requirements document, another 2 to 3 years to design your system, another year or so to test it. That's 6+ years.
And you don't even know if it's going to work.
Exactly. We've got to go faster and not only buy, but field systems on much shorter timeline.
What you just described is like, in a sort of way, the vivacity of the US structure compared to the European structure. And this is something that we Europeans are painfully aware of, this kind of like approach that you just described of try, test it, see if it works, try it again, go back, I'll send it to the end users, trial and error, which is I see also a bit in SpaceX, this kind of approach of don't spend 2 years or 6 years on something, on a prototype, go straight to the applications. It's a very interesting approach.
And that's part of the culture change that we need to see, right? As we're used to doing everything very sequentially on long time horizons. The pace at which technology is moving, the pace at which China's moving that we need to be very cognizant of, they're not going to wait. And so we do need to adapt our government structures and processes to meet the pace of technology development.
So this is something very interesting, how we can speed up the pace, how can we meet the needs of commercialization of this technology advance to make all this fluid and easier?
A few areas. One is, as you think about the problem definition, is don't be so overly prescriptive in your requirements that it leads a designer down the path of designing some very exquisite space capability that then has to do everything, costs hundreds of millions, billions of dollars to build, and will take 10 to 15 years. Be much more flexible in what is the problem that you're trying to solve without providing over specificity. You now bring in solution providers, give them flexibility to design different options and to deliver capabilities quickly. I've seen this in the artificial intelligence world as the Department of Defense has sought to embrace artificial intelligence technologies. You companies, I'm going to bring in multiple companies. You're all going to compete. You have 6 months to deliver me a fielded capability. I know it's not going to be 100%. It may be 50, 60, 70%, but we're going to get it fielded and our operator is going to kick the tires on it, see how it works, see if it solves the problem. If it doesn't work, we have failed fast. If it does work, great, we move out quickly to scale it. If it's somewhere in between, which is where most things are going to be, you quickly iterate on that. So that minimum viable product that you put out that maybe is 60% effective, you give feedback and you come back 6 months later and now it's 70%, 80%. And that's good enough nowadays. We don't have the luxury of time to wait 10, 15 years.
Carrie, this was a very interesting discussion. I really like your practical approach and I like the vision that you put. It is very clear and it's very, in a sort of way, I can see how you see the direction and it's priceless to have the opportunity to speak with experts, actually see how the path can be tracked. And I like this idea of like fluidity, not perfection. Let's do it. Let's see what happens. Anything else you would like to add?
And I make those observations having spent time in government at a space startup as an engineer early in my career. So probably there's a lot of failures and lessons learned that I feel fortunate to have made, but to have benefited from them. So now I am in a position where I get to bring all of that knowledge, the startup technology, venture capital knowledge, the government knowledge, the technical knowledge to bear.
All together. Okay, fantastic. Carrie, thank you so much for your intervention, for your precious insights. And I really hope that we will have the chance again to interact and understanding how all these pictures is coming together from the defense point of view, commercial point of view, US, Europe, all this kind of complex piece of the puzzles that have to fit together.
Thanks so much, Emma, for doing this. You really are providing voice to these issues and you are helping to educate so many individuals in both of our continents and really globally of not only the issues in space, but really the opportunities and the benefits and how I think we always need to be careful. We space folks tend to talk to space folks, but when you think of all of the capabilities that space can provide to better our lives here on Earth, not just security, but economically, scientifically, societal benefits, it's tremendous. And you are helping to articulate all of that.
We work on this problem every day, Carrie, so it's our bread and butter. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Thanks for joining us on this Space Cafe Radio Prague Space Security mini-series, supported by PSSI, the Prague Security Studies Institute. PSSI is the organizer of the 7th Prague Space Security Conference, part of a prestigious high-level conference series launched in 2011. If you wish to learn more about this topic, do not miss our first Prague Space Security series, available on all our channels.